Hello and welcome to your weekly roundup of all the latest news and ramble about the world of electric cars from the team at electrifying.com. This week, we're talking about the weather. Of course we are. We're British. What else do we do? And we'll also be coming up with our wish list for electric car ownership. Welcome to the Kilowatt Half Hour. I am Ginny.
I'm Mike.
I'm Tom.
And you're going to have to bear with me today because actually, since the last podcast, I've basically been in bed with flu. So it was my way of escaping the weather. So should we turn to the weather first of all? I'm just quite interested to know, how have your cars been faring in what was -8 degrees here this morning? Which I know, if you are not listening to this podcast in the UK and you're listening to it somewhere like Finland or Sweden or lots of other places, will be like, yeah, that's quite a nice warm balmy day. But that's pretty cold for the UK. What's been going on with charging and battery capacity and all of that?
Yeah, I think my battery capacity's plummeted. So you look at the range, especially on the Leaf in this weather, and it's like, okay, yeah, I should have preheated and I should have done all the other things, and I'll just have to wear a coat and turn off the heater, I think, at the moment. But I've got on test at the moment a Lexus RZ, which has something very clever, which is it's got infrared panels in the lower part of the dashboard. So it warms your knees using infrared rather than using like a proper heater and heating the whole of the car. And it doesn't seem to be much more efficient, but it's lovely because your knees get quite cold. It's surprising. You think,
Yeah.
especially at my age, don't they? You sort of like, so yeah, you get in the car and after a few minutes, it's toasty. It's interesting, that sort of infrared thing. It's meant to use much less energy.
Okay, Mike, how are you faring in the Ioniq?
It's okay, but I the other morning I forgot to precondition it. So, I forgot to, how it is. You kind of think, I must remember to 15 minutes before, press the button, make sure it's nice and hot and everything. I forgot to do it. So I got into it. So I dialed in 21 degrees, whatever. So the fans all went up to number 5. And of course it went crazy. And I live at going up a hill. And all of a sudden the range dropped to 185 miles from full. And this is a car that's got almost 300 miles of WLTP range. And I was thinking, that's not even enough to get me where I need to go. And fortunately, when they got up to temperature and the fan went down to number 1 again, it went back up to 230, whatever it was. So, but for a moment there, I was just thinking, well, that's bad. Yeah. That's like 100 miles off WLTP. It's never done that before. But I think preconditioning is the key. If you can get it warm, get everything kind of toasty when you get in there, that does make a huge difference. It doesn't really tend to affect your range. But yeah, getting probably about 20, 30 miles less than I would get in the middle of summer at the moment, which isn't good.
That seems pretty good to me, if I'm honest. I'm in the i5 at the moment. And because I probably, unlike you, I'm leaving the house every morning at about 7:15 to drop my son to the school bus. So I just have it set to go every day. And it is such a joy getting into a toasty car. This has been, particularly feeling ropey and having flu and getting up in the morning and the car's warm. And it's like, oh my God, I love this car so much. I just love that thing about electric cars. Preconditioning is just a thing of wonder on a cold winter day. But in terms of range, I've been getting about 220 miles. So what's that, about 2.7 miles per kilowatt hour. So a fair bit less than I would be expecting in balmier conditions, quite a lot less actually. And I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because I just have that set ready to go every night. So, because I know that I'm leaving at a regular time. But I just wonder, what other tips have people got? Do you always have your car ready to go toasty, or are you a bit more like Mike?
Forgetful.
You'll hopefully try and remember to set it in the morning. But just out of interest, why don't you just set it for a departure time?
I never go out at the same time.
What stops
you doing that? I never go out at the same time. This is the thing. It was one of those things. I just thought, well, I'm just always do it manually. I mean, the thing is, I go to running club the same time every Monday night, so that's fine. I probably should set it for that. Funny enough, I used to set my i3 when I used to go to night school to learn Italian, and I don't go to night school. I'm still learning Italian. But the other day, I came past the car after I'd been for a walk, and I noticed the heating was on in the car. And I haven't been there for 3 years, but I'd obviously left in the program to heat the car up at 5 o'clock on a Tuesday night. And that was when I was walking past the car saying, why is the car on? Why is the i3 running? And it was only when I got back to the thing. Of course, it's in the driveway, so I never notice it normally going. So I've remembered to switch that off. So it's obviously burning through at half a kilowatt of power every sort of Tuesday at 5 o'clock for the last 3 years without me
Yeah.
noticing. So yeah, if you do set these things, you've got to remember that they're still on.
Yeah, you do. You do. And I'm the worst at doing that because I just have it set every day, Monday to
Yeah.
Friday, ready to go at 7:15. And I don't ever, if I'm going to be away or not doing the run for whatever reason, I don't ever change that. I just leave it. And actually, I know this is not the done thing, but I'm going to jump around to the post bag.
Okay.
Because we normally do the post bag at the end, but we've had a question about that I just think really fits in now with what we're chatting about. So let me try and find it. Okay, this is it. It's from Tatson, who said, I'm getting my first EV next month, a Nissan Aria. Good choice. I'm already confused about what app I should use for charging it. My energy supplier, Octopus, say to use theirs. My home charging company, Omi, say to use theirs. And Nissan, naturally, say to use theirs. What app do you use for setting things like your charging schedules? Do you use the charger? Do you use the energy supplier? Or do you use the car?
I think in his case, if he's got an Omi charger and he's got Octopus, then he can get Octopus Intelligent Go, which is the cheapest by far and gives you 6 hours of cheap power. So I would use the Octopus one because then you can be sure that you're getting the cheapest power from them rather than using one of the other ones, which won't necessarily give you that. So that's my answer.
I am a Luddite and I basically just set it all up in the car. I just set my schedule up and have it ready to go like that.
Few people have messaged in about, because my pod point broke over Christmas, so a few people have said, why don't you use the charger in the car like Ginny said? I have tried. The Hyundai one does seem to have a bug in it. It's the Hyundai and the Kia EV does have, in that you set the time slot, you plug it in, it charges at that one, and then instantly forgets what that charging slot you put in. So the next time you plug it in, it's gone back to default, which is like not having anything at all. So there seems to be lots of reasons why, and sometimes it keeps it, sometimes it doesn't, but it's not reliable. So you've got to kind of constantly keep checking that when you plugged it in, it's doing it. So for those people who ask why I haven't used the car, that's why, because it's not been reliable. It's been slightly more reliable than the pod point, which hasn't worked. But yeah, I'm kind of in between solutions for this one.
I think it just depends on the car as well. I think that's the thing, is there's no real sort of straightforward answer to this question, is there? Because there's things like Tom has just pointed out, depends on what kind of tariff you're on. Just depends on how actually some cars are just really not set up. I had a Peugeot E208 charging scheduling, and that was a nightmare. I just wasn't set up to do it very well. So I think it just really depends. So it is one of those things that you do just need to probably do a bit of reading around and come and ask the questions to us here on the podcast, because it does differ, I think, depending on a lot of factors, doesn't it? Which is the best way for you.
And just going back to the preconditioning, I've got the timer set up on my charger because it means I don't have to change it when I've got different cars.
Yeah.
But that means that it stops providing power except in those 4 hours at night. So that means if I precondition and I put the preconditioner on, it's not running off the mains, it's running off the battery. So I have to, if I want to precondition using the mains, I have to go and boost from the app or the charger and then do it, which is a bit of a faff. It's almost easier to scrape the car with the ice.
No, it's never easier to scrape the car, Tom. I actually fundamentally disagree with that. There is no way that it is ever easier to scrape a car than getting into a toasty warm car.
True.
So should we move on to, we thought that because it's still January and we can still look to the year ahead, we were going to come up with some of the things that we would really like to see change in 2024 to make electric car ownership just smoother, easier, better, whatever. So, and we'd love to hear yours as well. We've got a few things that we all think we would really like to see happen. But do let us know in the comments below if you are an electric car driver, or indeed if you're not, either what would convince you to go electric or what would actually make your experience easier. So who wants to go first on this one? Anybody? Don't know.
Yeah,
Mike, do you want to go first? What's on your wish list?
This is a tough one to crack because I can understand the economics of this, but I would like to see public rapid charging becoming more affordable, because I think at the moment, if you don't have a driveway, I know there are options, and if you are canny, you can get a cheaper way of charging up. But for the vast majority of people, you're looking at paying 70, 80p per kilowatt hour to charge up. And if you're buying privately, you're not getting any sort of kickback in terms of company car tax or anything like that. If you're just looking purely at the running costs, fueling costs of your car, there's so little to choose between that and petrol and diesel. Unless you really want an electric car, there's no massive advantage to do it. So, and I know we've set out a campaign. We've campaigned for a reduction in VAT for charge point providers
Yeah,
but something needs to happen, doesn't it? Because it's not sustainable. It's not an attractive
it
proposition to think
does.
you're going to be paying 80p a kilowatt hour for power when you're paying maybe 9p at night or whatever at home. So I know the two things aren't the same. Commercial electricity supply is different to domestic. Yeah, would you agree? I think something needs to happen to make it more affordable.
I would agree. I would agree massively. As you said, we've done a lot of campaigning around trying to get a reduction on VAT, which is, of course, only 5% on home energy, but VAT on public charging is charged at 20%, which means that straight away you're at a disadvantage. So we've done a lot of work around that. And I think why this matters so much is because if you look at the overall electric vehicle sales, they are going predominantly to people who can charge at home. So we know that the last figure I saw was 85, close to 90% of sales are going to people who have got access to home charging. Yet we know the stat is that around 60% of the UK can charge at home. So, it's definitely something that we need to address, because otherwise we're going to end up with this sort of situation where those people who can't easily charge at home are just not encouraged to make that switch to electric because it's too difficult and too expensive.
Yeah.
Tom, what would be your wish list for 2024?
Well, mine is also about charging, and I've just done a big bit of research into the best tariffs for electric car drivers. And what I've realised is that if you want one of these intelligent tariffs, like Octopus Intelligent Go or OVO have one as well, then you have to have a certain car or a certain charger. Now, there are two chargers, which are Omi or Indra, and then there's this list of car manufacturers. Now, as it happens, none of the cars I have are on that list, so it means that I'm paying more, and I'm paying more for a shorter time as well. So, Octopus Intelligent Go, for example, you get 6 hours of the cheap electricity in addition to getting the cheap stuff for your car. So the list is growing all the time, but I wish they'd hurry up and get the chargers that I've got and the cars that I've got on that list, because it makes a real difference. And not just to the cost, it's about greener electricity as well.
My really big beef about that is the cars I can kind of go, all right then, because, there's a lot of work to do with manufacturers and OEMs to get their cars ready and all of that. But why only a couple of chargers? Because so many, it's not like it's anything special that those chargers do that probably our chargers don't do. And a charger is such a big thing to swap. So you're kind of just like, you're ruled out of it. There's just two chargers. I genuinely don't understand why it's only those two chargers. Do you have any idea? Have you ever spoken to anyone about that?
I think it's just the software, as far as I can work out. So their software needs to talk to
it's having access
or OVOs, but I think it's the same with the cars.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. No, I think that's a really good one. Mine would be charging related as well, which I think is quite interesting, isn't it? It's definitely the biggest thing that it's the beef. It really is the beef. Mine is more of a question, actually, is there a place in our towns for the slower AC chargers for only that provision? So I guess my wish would be that we get a better mix of charging out there, because we seem to be falling into this trap of we only have either really, ultra rapids, or we have lots of ACs. So in my local town centre and around quite a lot of the towns around where I live in Oxfordshire, they've put in banks of chargings, the local councils, but they're all 22 kilowatt AC, every single one. So there might be, I think it's like 30, there's about 30 throughout the two locations locally to me. So obviously not everybody's car will be able to take advantage of that faster AC rate. A lot of cars won't be reaching anywhere near then. And the maximum time you can park is 3 hours. So when I sort of do the maths on that, you start to think, I've done it, I've parked there for 2 or 3 hours just to see, and it's a tiny amount. of range that you're putting in your car. It's not worth it. I mean, of course it's worth it, but it's not going to help people who are coming to the town, who perhaps struggle to charge elsewhere, who would really like to top up their battery. It only works if you're able to park overnight. And if you can, you don't have access to home charging and you can park there overnight, then it's really useful for you. But I just get a bit frustrated that, yes, they've put all these charges in, they're all very, very happy and proud about it, but actually, is that really useful? Or do we need a better mix of chargers in our towns? Personally, I would rather see a couple of 50s, and I would like to see some ultra rapids that will give people different options. But that might just be me. I don't know. Maybe people out there, maybe you're listening and you're thinking, God, no, I love my AC chargers, and please don't ever take them away. But I just think there is a feeling that councils are very keen to get chargers in, and they're not necessarily thinking about the need of the people who actually will be using them. Any thoughts?
Well, I think if you've got 3 hours at 22 and your car charges at 22, like the area we've had, then you're getting 66 kilowatts, which
You
is, or
never,
kilowatt hours,
yeah,
which is a lot.
But you know what? The fact is that those chargers very rarely give that speed anyway. And they're in an area where actually parking is at a premium. So I know loads of electric car owners who literally just use them as free parking spaces. So they park and they'll pay a little bit, and it might cost them an extra couple of pounds to park for the hour. But if you can't park and that's an option, I think, look, I'm not saying we don't need them, but what I'm saying is I think we need to think a lot more about getting the right chargers at the right speeds into the right places. And I think that there is this thing about numbers of chargers, and I think we get a bit obsessed with that. And actually what is far more useful is thinking about what are actually going to be handy for the people that are using them.
Yeah. I think,
Yeah. If I can do what you did, Ginny, and go to the post bag again, there's there was a guy called Steve Keeley, STE Keeley, who said that he's got Aldi 11 kilowatt chargers at 24p per kilowatt, which first of all is very cheap. But I did wonder, is he only allowed to park there for like 90 minutes? Because that's not going to be an awful lot. So you'd have to sort of go to Aldi every day and park there for an hour and a half, which doesn't seem terribly convenient. I mean, if you could park in the Aldi car park for enough time to fill your battery, that's great.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine that's true, because these places do have time restrictions, don't they?
They do, and you're paying to park as well. So you're not just, you're paying to charge, but you are also paying to park on top of that as well. But yeah, I'd love to know what everybody thinks of that one. Mike, what do you reckon? Am I being chargist, slow chargist?
No, but I think that there's a few things going on there, isn't there? I think if obviously future proofing, if they do generally put out 22 kilowatts, I think that's kind of a deal breaking thing. And if all cars took 22, then in that period, then it would be useful. I think what you were saying, the broader picture about being the right charges in the right places. I stayed at a hotel the other day and they had a rapid charger in the car park, which seems pointless because there was someone who was obviously checked in, put the car on it, back in their room, probably sleep overnight, get the car in the morning. Whereas you're going to be there for overnight, aren't you, at a hotel? So just take that 50 kilowatt rapid charger out and just put a bank of 7 kilowatt, put even for 3 kilowatt hours, because most people will be able to get a fairly reasonable charge on that. Hotels where people are staying overnight do not need rapid chargers, because people, I'm the only one who seems to go out in your dressing gown, in your bathrobe, to go move the car after it's charged, even if it's at midnight or something, because I'm conscientious about that. But nobody else seems to give a rat's ass about it and just kind of parks their car and leaves it. And reception say, "Oh, we'll know what room they're in, but we don't want to call them." So you're kind of stuck unless you check in at bank. You arrive there bang on the check-in time. You're not going to use it. So yeah, rapids in hotels, daft idea.
Yeah, they are a daft idea. And again, but in answer to that point about do they get the speeds, they're not really getting.
Because it must be a shared connection then. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it is. So, I just think that it's quite a complex job, fitting chargers and making sure you get the right ones. And I'm not entirely sure that leaving local councils just to listen to private companies who will go, this is the way forward, put a load of these in, it's great. I think, we do just need to give it a little bit more thought. So that's a bit of our wish list for 2024. As I said, let us know in the comments below, or you can email us, info@electrifying.com. And we'd love to hear what would be on your wish list for 2024. Should we turn to the news now? Anybody got anything newsworthy? to chuck into the mix? Go on, Mike.
Vauxhall have announced there's going to be which we knew was coming, but they've announced prices for the longer range Mocha. It was the Mockery, now the Mocha Electric. It's going to start from £37,610 and go up to £40,000, which is a lot of money. There's two things I think I wanted to sort of cover there. You get to the bottom of the press release, which probably should have been at the top of the press release, that if you're buying this on finance, which as we know, 96% of cars are all bought on PCPs and everything, there's a 7% contribution from the brand. So a £7,000 contribution from the brand. So you think, well, why didn't you just make the list price £7,000 cheaper? Then you would have a car that starts under £30,000 for a long range, 250-mile cars. But everybody looks at the list price, don't they? Which is nuts, because you don't look at a house price and think, well, I'm going to pay that for it in cash. People do buy it on finance, and the finance rates are reasonable. They're £399 a month, But people have this hang up and looking at the price and thinking that's a 40 grand car when it isn't. And as Tom pointed out this morning, there are some very good, obviously not the long range one, the standard car. If you really want a Mocha on your driveway, Tom found a November 2022 Mockery with 9,600 miles on the clock, and the price was £15,000 to you. That's less than half what the new one is.
I guess the reason they're playing around with it like that is that it allows them that flexibility to hopefully reduce the discount. Yeah. Personally, if that is what they're thinking, I can't imagine that's going to happen anytime soon. Can you? So yeah, they should have just gone clean and gone, we're giving it a massive price cut, and here's a slightly more affordable electric car. I just seem a bit curious.
So that's my story.
And Tom, what about you? News hound, what's been going on?
Well, one that caught my eye yesterday was Start Rescue, who's a breakdown recovery company, saying that the most common cause of electric car call-outs is the flat tyre, not a flat battery. And I think we've known this, but everybody thinks that you're going to get stranded by the side of the motorway having run out of battery power. But actually, you're more likely to have to call them out for a flat battery or a flat 12-volt battery. Which I think we've all experienced. I've certainly experienced it more than once. But even that apparently is less common on an electric car than it is on a petrol or diesel.
Really?
Apparently
that does surprise me, because we have all experienced that. And I don't remember quite as many people experiencing that with petrol or diesel cars. But whereas it's reasonably commonplace for us with electric, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think that the figures they give are 23.7% for electric cars and 29% for petrol and diesel. I think that you have to think that electric cars are generally newer, and there are a lot of old petrol and diesel cars which will have weak batteries, and therefore, I would expect them to be higher on that. But I think you need to use your electric car to keep the 12-volt topped up, don't you? That's the key thing. Yeah. If you leave it for a couple of weeks, all those systems, all those over-the-air updates and everything else start to drain the 12-volt, and then you could be in trouble.
Yeah, I've done a lot of work with Edmund King, who's president of the AA Foundation over the years, and he's always said that what goes wrong with electric cars? Just the same things that go wrong with petrol and diesel. It's always tyres. That's the main common thing. But it's not quite as good a story, is it, or a headline to say that, really. I think from the one that really caught my eye this week, being a football fan, was about the Euros. Because BYD have announced, haven't they, that they are going to be one of the main sponsors of the Euros. And what I thought was really interesting about this was the fact that if you cast your mind back to both the men's and women's Euros, it was Volkswagen who were the sponsors. And do you remember that? And they had the little car. Do you remember the little car that carried the ball?
Yeah, bless it.
And Nissan before that?
Was it? Oh, yeah, it was.
Nissan before that. But the fact that it was Volkswagen... Yeah, but the fact that it was VW and the Euros this year, Tom, I'm going to put you on the spot because I know you're not the football fan amongst us. Where are the Euros this year? I've just given you quite a big hint.
In Europe.
Okay, technically you are right. Can you narrow it down a bit, perhaps?
I can't. I really don't.
I'll put you out of your misery. They're in Germany. So And Volkswagen came out with the most Volkswagen Germanic line as to why they decided to not renew their sponsorship deal, even though they actually are in Germany this year. And it was about they needed to consider cost discipline. Isn't that a brilliant line? Cost discipline. So in BYD have swooped, signed it up. For me, it was just another example of how, when we look at all these brands that are coming through and, we're hearing about new brands that wanting to launch in Europe all the time from China. BYD are one that are just definitely one to watch. They've got massive ambitions. And I thought that was just quite a nice, bold thing that there they are. Euros are in Germany, and it's actually BYD now that's sponsoring them this year.
Yeah.
So, yes, you know that, Tom, you'll be booking your ferry and heading over there and trying to get tickets desperately, won't you?
Yes. Yeah.
No.
I use those sorts of championships to go for a drive or go shopping because I know it'll be quieter.
Do you know what? As my fellow football fan, Mike, what do you reckon? I thought it was just interesting. It just shows, just how much ambition BYD have got.
And
I think.
money. But yeah, I think it would be. I think it wouldn't have got unnoticed that BYD would have done it in Volkswagen's backyard, so to speak. You would imagine that Volkswagen would just do that for their own championship, wouldn't you? And I'm sure that was the original plan. I'd be surprised if that wasn't part of the original deal to have it for this one as well. But yeah, it's a cheeky move. Yeah. But it's a great move because, it'd be BYD in front of a lot of people who won't have heard of the brand. So yeah, it's clever.
Yep, that pesky cost discipline. Yes. There we go. Right, should we do the post bag? Should we do postman Mike? Now, you'll all be very happy to know, if you're listening, that because I've got a bit of a rotten chesty cough and a sore throat, I'm not going to do the song.
Yeah. Good.
Because I just don't think my voice could take it. So please do feel free to cheer.
Yeah. Well, I'll on the subject, I mentioned my Hyundai charging quandary. Does it work at Tesla chargers? So thank you very much to David S., Nigel Hudson, and Robert Armstrong, who all emailed a message in with advice saying they've tried it and it works very slowly, but it works. So thank you hugely for doing that. On the subject of being told off, which we should always cover in the comments, we're usually getting told off. GS says, when you mention CarPlay, you should also mention Android Auto. Otherwise, you're promoting Apple over other manufacturers. He says, not all of us are iSheep with iPhones. Android has a 70% global market share. So, sorry, GS. I think whenever we mention it on the podcast, it is from personal experience rather than part of a review. And because we work in sort of publishing and media and production and everything, we tend to be an Apple-based business. I think we all have iPhones. That we're all iSheep, I'm afraid, GS. So that if we're referring to it, it is shorthand. But I think in all our reviews, we do mention Android Auto as well. But the best complaint, thank you, Obi Paddles on YouTube, who says, please don't do the Postman song ever again. Full stop. That was his comment. So, Obi, thank you. That's perfect.
Done just for you this week. Nicola will be back next week, and I cannot guarantee that she will adhere to that rule. So I have a feeling that Postman Mike might be back with his song next week. But you've got to pass for 1 week.
I'll rattle through a couple of others. I think we're already getting on time-wise, getting over, aren't we? I'd imagine. But yes, on the subject of long drives not being possible in electric cars, the greatest handle ever says, Stan at Kangaroo Island TV from Australia. Says, I've just driven my Polestar long range on an epic. He's driven his Polestar long range on a 4,000-mile road trip around Eastern Australia at the busiest time of year. He had no problems with charging, even remote areas, and the car was amazing. I mean, you've been there, Jenny. The size of Australia takes some getting used to, doesn't it? You kind of think it's big, but then you look at it on a map.
That's really interesting, actually, because I was there for my sister's wedding last year, and I drove up from Sydney to Byron Bay, and I've got to say, it was the first time in years I didn't drive electric, because the infrastructure on that drive, it just wasn't there enough for what I needed. So that's really interesting. And also, I'm just so happy that we have a listener who lives on Kangaroo Island. I hope you live on Kangaroo Island, because you are Kangaroo Island TV, because that is just such a glorious place. So yeah, lots of love to anyone who's listening from Australia, because that's where my sister lives and it's like my second home. So, yes. But next time I'm there, I have driven electric cars around Sydney and actually found that, again, even that was still pretty tricky, I thought, charging wise, but that was probably 18 months ago now. So it's good to see that the infrastructure is improving out there.
That's good. On the subject of your first home, which, as we all know, is the greatest city in the world, Manchester, on the subject of charging in Manchester, because last week you said, oh, where should I charge in Manchester? Because you were querying it. So we've had a lot of people reply. Oh, now, Ginny and Cruth, and Manchester has quite a few MFG chargers across the city. In the north of the city, there are MFG chargers at Moston and near Middleton, and Brackendog also gives some thumbs up to the MFG chargers in Manchester, which I like MFG chargers. They're really good. They're usually in petrol forecourts, so they've got facilities. Good. Never had a bad charger, an MFG charger. They're good. They kind of go under the radar a bit, don't they? Because the others are kind of, the grid serves, your Instavolts and everything are kind of a bit more high profile. But MFG are quietly making a lot of progress in their sort of forecourt. So yeah, there you go, Ginny. MFG, it's the way forward.
Well, thank you for those tips. I will make sure that I give those a try and turn myself away from the Tesla chargers at the traffic centre.
Okay.
Which, as you know, I'm very keen on.
Yeah. Well, they work, don't they? So, not to feel missed out, Tom. Brendan McHale says he's in the same situation with you. He's just replaced his 2015 24 kilowatt hour Nissan Leaf. He'd replace it with an MG4. And it's the same way that you and I get attached to things, don't we? He says he hopes his old Leaf has gone to a good home. I mean, I always think that. Whenever I sell a car, I'm always sad to say, I hope it goes somewhere nice. He's the same. He still has 65 to 85 miles of range. But he's not particularly pleased with our comments about CHAdeMO, about whether we should replace it. He said, not yet, if you want a thriving second-hand market at the lower end. And he's got a good point, isn't it? Because there's a lot of early Leafs and current Leafs that still have CHAdeMO. So he says, let's not get rid of them too quickly. And he thinks a lot of people who could use a first-generation Leaf to commute in on the ULEZ, low mileage, they might not do many more than sort of 60 miles a day. So there's quite a good market for people using it for that. So there's that. And what else have we got? Well, we've managed to cover off quite a few of them. So I think that's probably... there's one about your Zappy charger, Ginny. It says, Ginny, does your Zappy charger show a failure screen, or does it trip its fuse on the fuse board? Do you know where it's tripping it from? Do you have to go into the box under the stairs?
Oh, it trips on the fuse board.
If it's...
trips straight on the fuse board.
He said, he said, if the former is a Contact My Energy, which we don't think it is, he's had the same problem. He's had the board replaced, which worked for a while, and it started tripping again. So yeah, it does sound like it's in between the two, doesn't it? I imagine you'll get your electrician blaming the box and the box blaming your system. So yeah, I'm afraid we've got no solution on that one. We'll have to wait for another week.
Well, touch wood, it hasn't done it for a few weeks. It did it a lot over Christmas. It did, not a lot, 3 times over Christmas, but it hasn't done it since then. And I am firmly of the belief that unless it absolutely needs to be fixed, then I'll just leave it and hope it sorts itself out. I'm a kind of turn it on, turn it off again kind of girl. That's my solution for anything that doesn't work.
Brilliant.
It's not very technical, but it does me fine. Right, I think we should wrap up on that note. You have been listening to the Kilowatt Half Hour. As always, do let us know all your comments, your thoughts, your questions in the comments below. And of course, you can email us info@electrifying.com, and we'll be back next week. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.